Welcome back, everybody, to the Experts in Fire podcast. Today's episode is the top 3 most common mistakes when installing gas logs. We're going to talk about sizing, the type of fireplace, and using a licensed professional. Let's get into it. Hey, Randy, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today, Mike?
I'm awesome, man. I am loving life. I actually got to move to a different part of the house so that we could do this podcast because my daughter is back to school.
Oh, in classroom.
You know what? We are time stamping this podcast forever because everyone will forever know they must be in 2020.
Yes, definitely.
It's just different times, man. Different times. I'm glad that you are healthy, though, brother, and that you're able to join us today. Talking about the 3 most common mistakes when getting gas logs. So the first one up is sizing. Talk to us about why sizing is important when it comes to gas logs.
This is a really good one, especially for this time of year, Mike, when, it was like 35 degrees when I rolled in here this morning here in Michigan. It's beautiful outside, but it is definitely cold. So gas logs are definitely at the forefront of most folks around here.
100%.
Sizing mistakes are very common because they're just incorrectly taken based on a particular log set that a client wants. The important measurements that we always like to start with is going to be the width across the front of the fireplace, the width across the back of the fireplace, the depth front to back, as well as the height of that front opening. Fireplace log sets are going to vary based on if somebody's using natural gas and they just want a simple match light setup, or if they're going to a full function style variable flame remote control or electronic. They take up different spaces within that firebox depending on how you're going to operate it.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the log sets themselves, I think most people think I have this much space, so I need to put these size logs in there, and that's really the misnomer in the whole thing. You really want to know what size space you have opening both in the front and the back of that firebox, because a lot of fireboxes will taper, and we're going to get to that when we get to number 2 on type of fireplace, but they taper toward the back. So you're trying to fit a rectangle inside of this space, and that rectangle might fit in the front of it and then maybe about 4 or 5 inches back, but it won't go all the way to the back. So that's a very important measurement to have when it comes to sizing your log sets to go in there. But then, Randy, you talked about controls, and I think it's important because I remember having a lot of conversations back when I was on the sales floor, and I know you have a lot of conversations, especially this time of year, on the control side of things and how that changes everything when you're trying to size that log set and burner pan into the firebox.
Absolutely. So across the board, each manufacturer is going to have some type of options for how to operate that log set. And just using your basic manual safety pilot valve, which is just a manual control knob, let's just say that takes up a couple inches of space. Well, when you move into controls like full function remote control, variable flame, or electronic, these controls are tied to the valve, which is tied to the main pan, and those may take up 4 or 5 inches of space. Now, what we're doing is we're having to downsize a log set so that we can fit it centered from left to right inside of the firebox. So a log set that is a manual valve, let's say that someone has a 30-inch, but I want a remote control. I'm just tired of getting up. I don't want to deal with it. Well, now we may have to step down to a 24-inch log set size to account for the dimensions of the valve assembly on the right-hand side. Now, there are different log manufacturers that have relocations where the valve controls might be around to the back, or they may go underneath the pan. So there are some different options. It's going to be a lot of the aesthetics of the log. So there's some conversations there that need to be done with the client on not only the sizing, but also the aesthetics and getting the correct fit for it. But when we're talking specifically about sizing is we want to make sure that it's centered in the fireplace, but something with some type of flame control remote versus a manual control. They are going to be 2 different styles, two different sizes as far as what's going to fit. And if it's not fit correctly, a couple things can happen. Is it may not vent properly up through the chimney, or those gases may come up into the house because it's not venting properly, because that someone has that pushed too far forward in the firebox because they do want a bigger set. But for safety reasons, we want to make sure that it's correctly sized so it fits in the fireplace correctly.
Absolutely. And that's a tough conversation to have with folks when they do select a log set that has some kind of valve off to the side, because it adds 3 to 5 inches, I think, typically, Randy. Is that right?
It's possible. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could take up to 5 inches.
Up to 5 inches. So now you've got 5 inches you've added. So if that log set is going to stay centered, that means you have to have 5 inches on the other side as well. You just lost 10 inches in the entire firebox.
Right.
So that, I mean, you can start talking about pretty big numbers. And most folks don't understand when they're staring at the pictures, they're looking at the pictures and they're dreaming the dream. And that's really what we want them to do. And that's why we have spent the time as a company putting together the team that you're a part of now, and that I was a part of for years as well. Folks who can help that dream become a reality. And there's nothing worse than people not understanding that this is what's about to happen, and they get this cockeyed, sideways shifted.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, we're talking about the extreme in sizes here, but it is, sizing's very, very important role. That's kind of where some of the first things that start off is getting the correct size in there, make sure it works properly and safely.
You have fire-related questions, and we have answers. You can email us your questions at podcast@woodlanddirect.com or give us a call at 586-221-3638. We would love to be able to answer them right here on the Experts in Fire podcast. So, that just dovetails right into number 2. What type of fireplace do you have? And most people go, it's a fireplace. Yep, you're right. It is a fireplace, but there are types of fireplace. So help us break that down a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, when we talk about types of fireplaces, let's start with just, old school brick and mortar that has a brick and mortar clay line chimney. I mean, old school masonry style fireplaces. The telltale is outside. It's that chimney that's all brick and mortar, has a clay liner on the inside of it. Those are true masonry fireplaces. And then you have, which we provide a lot of, zero clearance prefabricated metal fireplaces. You've got a couple different types in there. You have your wood burning. It's going to have a metal chimney flue pipe that goes all the way up through the roof. And then you have your vent free. So there are specific log sets for those types of fireplaces. With a masonry style fireplace, all brick and mortar clay line chimney, you can do vented or ventless logs into those. Now, these are going to be state specific. Using California, for example, you can't use any ventless products indoors in the state of California. So it doesn't matter if you have a prefabricated or a full masonry fireplace. It's just you can't use it. Prefabricated fireplaces in a wood burning unit. It is a wood burning, yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah, you burn wood at high temperatures, it vents up through that chimney. However, a lot of the ventless fireboxes, they will not allow a ventless gas log set into them. And it'll call that out. That's where you want to look into your manual or contact that manufacturer, because it will specifically say for vented logs only or vented appliance only, not applicable for ventless products. There will be some verbiage in the manual for that fireplace if it can or cannot use ventless logs, or always just call the manufacturer to confirm what can or cannot be used if you don't know. And then there's ventless fireplaces that don't have a chimney at all. And you can only use ventless logs in those. You cannot put a vented log set that gives you a nice big roaring flame in there. Otherwise, you're going to fill your house with carbon monoxide. So there are specific appliances and log sets for the type of fireplace that an individual has. And then I just real quickly like to touch on, for those folks that have a direct vent fireplace, solid glass panel, yes, you have a vent, but it's a solid glass panel. Those are specific. No deviations outside the manufacturer's specifications. Always call them. If you're looking to change your logs or do something with your media on the inside of those, always contact that manufacturer. Give them your model number, but you can't just go online and purchase any old log set for the direct vent. Those are very, very specific. And once again, direct vent, just to touch on it, it has a solid glass panel on it where you cannot access that flame whatsoever.
It's a good place to start is if you're staring at your fireplace or your firebox, does it have a big piece of glass in front of it? If it does, that's a direct vent fireplace. I want to point out here as well that just removing that big piece of glass does not mean it's okay to do something else now.
That is correct. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
That unit is designed to function in combustion air comes in through the venting on a direct vent fireplace. That front is completely sealed. So by taking that off, you change the entire environment of that fireplace. So please, please, please don't do that. So good place to start. Do I have glass on there? If I do, and you want to change the look of your logs, then you need to get a hold of the manufacturer and see what options they have for you, because it's going to be specific. If it's open, then I think the next question would be, do I have a vent to it or not?
Correct.
Right? If it's an open firebox and if I see there's a hole and I know I have a chimney running up and out, then I know I have the potential of being able to put gas log set in here. Then it's just a matter of discovering what you have and doing the homework on whether or not you can put that in place. Let's touch on real fast, because sometimes we do get that call and we ask, the most common question is, do you see black steel around the firebox? And back in the 70s, there was a thing called a heatilator. And so people will answer that question with, well, yeah, I see these black vents up here. And we have to get pretty specific in discovering, is this a zero clearance box, which is all metal? The whole thing is metal with some fake, well, I say fake, they're brick panels that are inside of them, versus a masonry style box that has some metal to it. Can you talk to that real fast?
So those old fireplaces, what they called the heatilator fireplaces, those were actually true masonry fireplaces. So they were all brick and mortar, clay line chimneys, or some type of brick and mortar CMU block style chimney. And then down below, before they put the facade, the brick face on and the mantles, you typically, what you had down below is you had intakes. Some had blowers in them, some did not. Air would be pulled in as you're burning the fire in those lower vents and then discharge it out the top. Hence the word heatilator. It was kind of they're designed to force heat coming off of a box. But what they did is, instead of using fire brick after they do all the mortar of the firebox, they would insert like this 1/4 inch or even thicker steel metal shroud to simulate, basically it was one piece unit and it would go in, and then that would tie into the chimney part of it itself. And what the steel would do is heat up, and that's how they were generating and reflowing the heat. And then they would do the mortar all over it, and basically mortaring in this big thick steel shroud firebox with inside the masonry firebox. Those are still masonry fireplaces. So you can still use a vented or a ventless gas log set in those types of units, because it is still classified as a true masonry fireplace. When we talk about prefab zero clearance, we're talking about fireplaces that are built in a factory. They arrive on a pallet, and then the contractor is building a 2x4 constructed wall, building that in, sheetrocking around it, putting some type of brick facade around it or tiling around it. Those are zero clearance. Those are very specific. When we say, referring back to the manuals, those all have a manual to them, just as if you were to buy your log set, that log set's gonna have a manual. That's what those are. Those are prefabricated fireplaces.
Absolutely. And, for our listeners out there, it can be confusing. It's not, once you get your hands wrapped around all the different options. But absolutely, we don't expect that all of the different types of fireplaces. That's why we are the professionals. But I'm going to use that to segue into the pros who are out there on the ground. And that is the licensed professional who would be able to walk in and look at what you have and know immediately. So, Randy, let's talk about, number one, the importance, and number two, how we as pros work with the pros on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause, we're talking of, the three most common mistakes. And, we talked about the sizing, just something being incorrectly sized, the wrong product for the wrong firebox. And then thirdly is a log set being incorrectly installed by a homeowner. And that's where our pros really come into play, is they're going to know the codes, the requirements. They are going to know the correct gas line sizing and pressures that are required. Stepping back a moment, and when I say incorrectly installed, like by a homeowner, is there's a lot of fireplaces out there, whether it's a prefab or a masonry fireplace, that have a gas line ran to them already because they have what's called a starter pipe for the wood, where you turn a key valve on, you light a match, you get your wood started, you shut that gas supply off, and you continue with your wood fire. There were starter pipes, very popular for a long time. However, a lot of those were just gas lines that were inadvertently ran, and they could be, and I'm just going to use a number here of like 20,000 BTUs, just enough gas to get the burner, the wood started, and they shut it off. Well, if you're buying a gas log set that requires 50, 60,000 BTUs, I'm just going to do it myself and hook it up, and then you have no flame coming up through it, or you have very little, and you want to know why do I have these candle flames? That's where the pros in doing a professional installation are really important. It's some of the first verbiage in any manual for log sets is these need to be installed by a licensed or certified pro. Those are the kind of things they're going to inspect too. I mean, it could be as simple as that, or you may have an outdated valve in there because that starter pipe's been there for 30 years. It's outdated, out of code. That's where our professional plumbers, they play their role. This is what they do. This is what you're paying for, not only the proper install, but also peace of mind and safety that is installed correctly and it's going to work properly for them.
Yeah, that licensed pro is going to be able to walk in and work on the scenario with you as well. So, Randy, one of the great things about doing what we do and partnering with our pros out there is they're going to be able to look and assess the situation right there on the ground. And we use all kinds of, we'll be on the phone, we'll FaceTime, we'll do anything we can to help a client reach that certain point. But at some point, there's a handoff to that local pro who's going to know the codes, who's going to be able to look at that box himself and see what's going on. He's going to know, man, this whole thing needs to be cleaned from top to bottom because you're going to turn these logs on and creosote's going to come dripping down through the flue. There's so many positives to having that pro on the ground, where what we do is we lean on being the pro when it comes to all of the specs of the product, understanding how it should be installed, knowing when they add a particular add-on to it, like a valve set, what that's going to do to the entire arrangement. And that's where that pro, I know you have a lot of pros that you work with. They lean back on us to say, hey, this is what the client's asking for. What's this going to do? And we can walk them through the scenario from that point forward. Even to the place where we have some pros who just send their clients to our website or to you and say, hey, pick one of these 3 or 4 or 5 and walk through this with Randy, and then I'll come out and inspect and install either in the same day or inspect first to make sure that it's all going to work and get back with you. There are a lot of ways that you as a homeowner can be protected just by utilizing the pros who are out there available to you. You can utilize our pros any day, every day, 6 days out of the week. We are not 7 days out of the week. Utilize our knowledge and then connect us if you have a pro that you're working with, a plumber, that's going to do the install, or just a local sweep who also carries that license to be able to install gas products. Connect us with them and we'll walk through exactly what they're looking at, brand, make, model, year, all that good stuff. And we can help in so many different ways. So that professional is very important. And, I really appreciate the fact that we have such good relationships out there. I mean, the majority of your book, Randy, is pros out there, correct?
Yeah, the majority of my clients are professionals in one fashion or another, whether the gas plumber, the electricians, the contractors, builders. They are, fantastic. And as we talk about pros and we talk about something that's incorrectly installed is, and I like to just bring this up because there are a lot of folks, just because I know I can install it doesn't always mean that I should. And when it's incorrectly installed, we do need to chat with that professional. There's some information that we need to be able to help assess what's going on with the product.
Absolutely. And, in the day and age we live in, especially since we are working our way through COVID-19 and we've seen a lot more people purchasing online, we find it imperative for them to understand that as you purchase, we're definitely the pros that will walk through the process with you, but you are surrounded by pros in your local area as well that are going to be able to do that install for you to make sure that you're safe. And that can't be stated any clearer. Safety is way more important than the 60, 80, 110 bucks that someone would charge you to install a log set. So let's just keep in mind, everyone, that there are so many amazing things going on in our world today, especially when it comes to the internet. And we're just trying to bridge that gap for people who are buying technical product online to the local installer to make sure that the professional is putting it in place. And you know what? We were talking about the top 3 most common mistakes when installing gas logs, which were sizing, type of fireplace, and licensed professionals. There are more to that, but we really appreciate you listening in today. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to say, go ahead and email us at podcast@woodlanddirect.com, or you can call us and leave us a message. That number is 586-221-3638, and we really appreciate you listening. Randy, once again, thank you, brother, for being here. I appreciate you giving up your time, being on the phones, working with your clients to sit here and talk with our folks.
Oh, always a pleasure, Mike. You have a great afternoon, sir.
You do the same, brother. You've been listening to the Experts in Fire podcast. Thanks for joining us. Coming up next is a 3-part series on how to grow your business with outdoor fire features. The first episode will be Timing is Everything. We'll see you then.